Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill. Hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, share this video, and once again, thank you for tuning in with me. Here at my channel, this is the Green Book, the guide for African and Black travelers around the world, where I also bring the news about what's happening to Black travelers in different parts of the planet. In this story, we're going to focus on African refugees trying to enter the United States after fleeing conflict zones. In this story, makes me realize my privilege so much as a Black person who's traveling with a powerful passport, as they say, the US passport, but I still have consideration and compassion for people who do not have the same opportunities as me. And I hope also with every story that I tell on my channel, this allows viewers of all races and backgrounds to have empathy and care and compassion for people who look different than you, who come from different places, and who are trying to just live a good life on this planet. So let's get to it. This story comes from the Griot. It's titled African Refugees See Racial Bias as U.S. Welcomes Ukrainians. There is every reason to extend the same level of compassion to refugees of color, U.S. Representative Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts and Mondaire Jones of New York say. This is from the Griot, I think also from the Associated Press, published on April 3rd, 2022. So Wilfred Tebe doesn't begrudge the U.S. for swiftly granting humanitarian protections to Ukrainians escaping Russia's devastating invasion of their homeland. But the 27-year-old who fled Cameroon during its ongoing conflict can't help but wonder what would happen if the millions fleeing that Eastern European nation were of a different hue. Pause right here. In the U.S., since I was born and since I can remember, we've had people fleeing conflict zones in Latin America and other places in the world trying to enter our country. And a lot of the times, the people that are trying to enter the U.S. fleeing a conflict zone are coming from places where we initiated the instigation. Now, I think in a tangential, doing mental gymnastics type of way, the war in Ukraine can be placed somewhat as a blame on the U.S. because we did try to expand NATO, and there was, this aggressive stance that we took on expanding NATO with this open door policy, an outdated, antiquated system that was anti-Soviet, that only antagonized Russia. But that's if you really do like real mental gymnastics to reach that point. I do think Ukrainians do have a right to seek asylum in any country that has laws that have asylum as a part of their legislation, right? And also, the same should be extended to people who come from Latin America, Africa, and Asia as well. But as I saw in my lifetime, people were denied entry from the U.S. from Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and other places that we have ravaged. Let's continue. As the U.S. prepares to welcome tens of thousands of Ukrainians fleeing war, the country continues to deport scores of African and Caribbean refugees back to unstable and violent homelands where they faced rape, torture, arbitrary arrest, and other abuses. I'm sure all of us remember last year the images of Haitians who were camped out at the Texas border, I think in the Rio Grande region, and then the U.S. Marshals came in on horseback with whips, chasing these Haitians back across the border, detaining them and deporting them. Meanwhile, they were also allowing in Afghan refugees who were fleeing a conflict as well. I am not trying to say the Afghans didn't deserve solace, and I'm not trying to say that the Haitians deserved it more than the Afghans, but we have seen with our own very eyes in front of us the double standards and the different treatment that African and Black people have faced when trying to enter these Western countries that are considered the models of the world. I spoke about this in my video about the African students who are detained in Poland and Estonia, fleeing Ukraine, and the same thing is happening at a much larger scale on the U.S. border. They do not care about a Black man, the Columbus, Ohio resident said, referring to U.S. politicians. The difference is really clear. They know what is happening over there, and they have decided to close their eyes and ears. Unfortunately, in this world, it seems like there are two tiers to conflict. There's the tier that people care about, and especially if it's white Europeans, and then there are other conflicts with people from the Middle East, Asia, and Africa that seem to not get as much attention, and therefore those people don't seem to get the same amounts of refuge. This is Wilfred Tebe, who fled Cameroon during its ongoing conflict. He's posing for a photo in the backyard of his home Thursday, March 31st, 2022, in Columbus, Ohio. Tebe's concerns echo protests against the swift expulsions of Haitian refugees crossing the border this summer without a chance to seek asylum, not to mention the frosty reception African and Middle Eastern refugees have faced in Western Europe, compared with how those nations have enthusiastically embraced Ukrainians. I spoke about this earlier. In March, when President Joe Biden made a series of announcements welcoming 100,000 Ukrainian refugees, granting temporary protected status to another 30,000 already in the U.S., and halting Ukrainian deportations, two Democratic lawmakers seized on the moment to call for similar humanitarian considerations for Haitians. So we're welcoming in 100,000 Ukrainians, as we should, but at the same time, kicking out other people who come from different places. And, some people in the US will say, well, we don't have space, or these people will eat away at our social safety nets. Number one, we don't have a strong social safety net in America, and there's plenty of space. There are states that are damn near empty. North and South Dakota, Wyoming, Utah, Montana. We have plenty of space to put people and have people contribute to our nation. What makes nations great are their people, not so much their natural resources, not so much their military. It's the people that make it. And a lot of what has made America a great country over this past 2 centuries has been the contributions of immigrants and people from different backgrounds who have started businesses, invented things, advanced things in the arts and humanities, and that sort of thing. I mean, Steve Jobs' parents were immigrants, right? And many of the top executives and chairmen and CEOs of some of the top companies in America come from India and China and Africa and different places. I still don't understand why we as a society don't see the value in welcoming in people. There are so many countries in the world whose populations are declining. They have a declining birth rate. And here we are rejecting people. Honestly, this makes no sense. There is every reason to extend the same level of compassion. U.S. Reps Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts and Mondaire Jones of New York wrote to the administration, noting more than 20,000 Haitians have been deported despite continued instability after the assassination of Haiti's president and a powerful earthquake this summer. Cameroonian advocates have similarly ratcheted up their calls for humanitarian relief, protesting in front of the Washington residence of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and the offices of leading members of Congress this month. Their calls come as hundreds of thousands in Cameroon have been displaced in recent years by the country's civil war between its French-speaking government and English-speaking separatists, attacks by the terrorist group Boko Haram, and other regional conflicts. Some people will say, well, if a country has a civil war, that's different than a war of aggression, which is happening in Russia and Ukraine. And in my opinion, I see no difference. Conflict is conflict. And if a country, which, by the way, Cameroon is a country that's a colonial construct whose borders were drawn up by European powers, if these countries, which were inherently unstable, fall apart, these people have just as much a right as a Ukrainian who's fleeing Russia to seek asylum in a safe country. And even if you disagree with that, many of the countries, such as the United States and most of them in Europe, have treaties and agreements that say they can welcome people from different countries who are fleeing asylum. Everybody across the world has the right to seek asylum in a different country. If you go to the border, if you go to passport control and you say, I am here seeking asylum, I know I don't have my visa or the proper documentation to enter, by the country's own laws that you are entering, they should give you that right. But unfortunately, as we are seeing, the hypocrisy and contradictions of these countries are on display, where they purposely decide when and where and with who to enact and enforce their own laws. And we need to stand up and speak and make sure that they actually do what is right for humanity. The advocacy group Human Rights Watch, in a February report, found many Cameroonians deported from the U.S. suffered persecution and human rights violations upon returning there. Tebe, who is a leading member of the Cameroon American Council, an advocacy group organizing protests this month, said that's a fate he hopes to avoid. Hailing from the country's English-speaking Northwest, he said he was branded a separatist and apprehended by the government because of his activism as a college student. Tebe said he managed to escape, as many Cameroonians have, by flying to Latin America, trekking overland to the U.S.-Mexico border, and petitioning for asylum in 2019. Pause right here. Many people will say, refugees are going to come and they're not going to assimilate. They're not going to follow the laws. They are going to commit crime. It is a proven fact at this point. And if you disagree with that, you're disagreeing with statistics and studies that have been done over decades, that people who move to a country, almost any country in the world, are the least likeliest to commit crime, be unemployed, and to be a drag on the social safety net. They contribute more in taxes, work the hardest, value the education that they get in these countries more than the indigenous people who live in those countries. So if you are saying that, well, we can't welcome in all these people because who knows what they're going to do, more than likely the person who's going to rob you, steal from you, kill you in your country will be a citizen who was born in your country. So we shouldn't be playing into these ideas and stereotypes about refugees. It's false, it's wrong, and it's not true. Refugees of all types are some of the hardest working people in any country. I will be held in prison, tortured, and even killed if I am deported, he said. I am very scared. As a human, my life matters too. The Department of Homeland Security, which oversees TPS and other humanitarian programs, declined to respond to the complaints of racism in American immigration policy. TPS stands for Temporary Protection Service. It also declined to say whether it was weighing granting TPS to Cameroonians or other African nationals, saying in a written statement only that it will continue to monitor conditions in various countries. The agency noted, however, that it has recently issued TPS designations for Haiti, Somalia, Sudan, and South Sudan. This is a good thing. All African or Caribbean nations, as well as to more than 75,000 Afghans living in the U.S. after the Taliban takeover of that Central Asian nation. Haitians are among the largest and longest tenured beneficiaries of TPS, with more than 40,000 currently on the status. I said this is a good thing, but like I said, this is temporary, and these people need permanent asylum if they want this. Also, by the way, pause, there is some belief that people have that people want to move to the U.S. and they want to stay here. Most people don't want to leave their country. Most people don't want to have to learn a new language, adapt to a new culture, assimilate into a different religion. Like I said, also refugees don't want to commit crime and hurt society, but many people are very accustomed and very proud of where they come from. Not every person that comes from Haiti fleeing the conflict there is going to want to stay in the U.S. forever. Because honestly, Haiti is probably, more relaxed, more chill. They can speak their language. They probably have better food than us. So I don't know why people think, well, they just want to come here and take jobs from us. No, they just want to stay and be safe and wait until the shit that we kicked up in their country is over so they can return. Not all of them, maybe not even most of them. I'm not sure about the statistics, but it's definitely sure. Not every person that wants to leave their country wants to permanently go. Other TPS countries include Burma, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. And the majority of the nearly 320,000 immigrants with temporary protected status hail from El Salvador. Lisa Patricio, who helped launch Catholics Against Racism and Immigration, argues the program could easily help protect millions more refugees fleeing danger, but has historically been underused and over-politicized. TPS which provides a work permit and staves off deportation for up to 18 months, doesn't have limits for how many countries or people can be placed on it, said Parisio, who is the advocacy director for the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. Yet former President Donald Trump, in his broader efforts to restrict immigration, pared down TPS, allowing designations for Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea in West Africa to expire. And this is why it is important for us to vote. Now, I'll be honest with you, 100% honest, because on my channel, I'll always be honest with you. I haven't voted since the election of Hillary Clinton. Hillary was the last person I voted for, right? But this is why it is important for us to vote, because a few thousand votes in a few different places helped Donald Trump get elected, and we saw how that ended up. And I want to tell a story for anybody who says, well, the president doesn't matter, local elections matter. When I was living in Miami, and I was a good Muslim man at the time, I used to attend the mosque, all the time on Friday. And I made a very, very, very close friendship with a friend of mine from Saudi Arabia. He was Sudanese from Saudi Arabia, and his name was Anas. Anas was in Miami studying, and Anas had been in the States for about 2 years, right? He had a family member who passed away, and this was right after Trump got elected, and he did the Muslim ban, right? If you guys remember, he didn't allow people from several African and Middle Eastern countries to come to the U.S., right? Anas had a Sudanese passport, even though he lived all of his life in Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has some weird immigration stuff where they don't allow people really to get citizenship easily. But Anas had a family member who passed away, and he really wanted to go see his family member in Saudi Arabia. But because of Trump's Muslim ban, which would have banned him as a Sudanese person from entering the U.S. if he left, he didn't get to go to the janazah, the funeral of the person who passed away in his family. And that broke my heart, and it really hurt him. And this is somebody I cared about and loved like a brother. You know what I mean? So these things have real world consequences. Elections matter. Who we vote for matters. Who is in office matters. And this is why I am not a part of this, antipathy that some people have when it comes to voting. It does matter, okay? Although programs like TPS provide critical protections for vulnerable refugees, they can also leave many in legal limbo for years without providing a pathway to citizenship, said Carla Morales, a 24-year-old from El Salvador who had been on TPS nearly her whole life. That's sad, in limbo. You're damn near stateless, It's absurd to consider 20 years in this country temporary, the University of Massachusetts Boston nursing student said. We need validation that the work we've put in is appreciated and that our lives have value. Once again, the point I'm trying to make, they have this girl in temporary limbo status. Meanwhile, she's studying to be a nurse to help treat our people. At least in the case of Ukraine, Biden appears motivated by broader foreign policy goals in Europe rather than racial bias, suggests Maria Cristina Garcia, a history professor at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, focused on refugees and immigrants. But Tom Wong, founding director of the U.S. Immigration Policy Center at the University of California, San Diego, said the racial disparities couldn't be clearer. The U.S. has responded without hesitation by extending humanitarian protections to predominantly white and European refugees, he said. All the while, predominantly people of color from Africa, the Middle East, and Asia continue to languish. Let me pause right here. I can take a step back and see the geopolitical, strategic reasons why America would want to have Ukrainian refugees maybe over other ones, because in this conflict with Russia, there's also the fight for public opinion, global opinion around the world, and most people around the world that are sensible are on the side of Ukraine. So if your country is showing hospitality to Ukrainian refugees, you're going to have more public sympathy towards your country's aims and objectives towards Russia, right? And in this Ukrainian conflict, this is one of the few times America has seemed like the good guy. I know this is weird coming from me, Mr. So critical of America, but in this conflict because of the leaking of U.S. intel about Russia's planned invasion, because of the news that was constantly coming out from the State Department about Russia's secret plans to, do like a attack on themselves to justify a war in Ukraine. That never transpired, but the war actually did transpire. Because of that, America has kind of seemed like the good guy, and they want to continue up this goodwill because America is at a real deficit of goodwill in the world. So by welcoming Ukrainian refugees, we're building up our reputation somewhat, but at the same time, we can also do that by welcoming other people across the world. And we are fortunate. We can never take this for granted as Americans. We are fortunate that people want to come to our country despite all of the fucked up shit we've caused in the world and the fucked up shit we do to ourselves. We are so blessed. We're like a fucked up family, right? That people still want to come over and have dinner at our house at, knowing that we're some of the sickest people on the block. So with that said, we should not be turning away people. We should be welcoming people. The U.S. population actually had a declining birth rate. Our population would be decreasing if it was not for immigration. And we're still the most multi-ethnic, multiracial country in the world. And we do have the most immigrants than any other country in the world. But that is what has made us so powerful. So let us not ever take this for granted. Please, please, if anybody's listening, do not be anti-refugee in America. This is not the way forward. This is not the way to continue American hegemony. If you're on the right wing and you want to continue to have America on top, you should be welcoming refugees because they're our only saving grace, Let's continue. Besides Cameroon, immigrant advocates also argue that Congo and Ethiopia should qualify for humanitarian relief because of their ongoing conflicts, as should Mauritania, since slavery is still practiced there. And some people will comment, well, how can you be critical of America when in Africa and Mauritania they have slavery there? I can be critical of all things that are wrong against humanity. Just because I'm critical of the US doesn't mean I'm not going to be critical of Mauritania or any African country that is backwards. Anyway. And they complain Ukrainian asylum seekers are being exempted from asylum limits meant to prevent the spread of COVID-19, while those from other nations are being turned away. Black pain and Black suffering do not get the same attention, says Sylvie Bello, founder of the DC-based Cameroon American Council. The same anti-Blackness that permeates American life also permeates American immigration policy. And this excuse for limiting the spread of COVID-19, this was the same excuse that China had, if you remember, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, to harass, arrest, and deport thousands of Africans from China. We all saw the videos of China disrespecting African businessmen, tourists, students who were there just trying to make a living or live their lives, and them getting hauled out of their apartments, put in detention centers, deported from China. And we should not use the spread of disease, which is one of the oldest tropes when it comes to anti-refugee and immigration policy, as acceptable for why we are turning away people at our border. All right. Vera Arnott, a Ukrainian in Boston who is considering seeking TPS, says she didn't know much about the special status until the war started and wasn't aware of the concerns from immigrants of color. But the Berklee College of Music sophomore hopes the relief can be extended to other deserving nations. All right. Arnott says TPS could help her seek an off-campus job with better pay so she doesn't have to rely on her family support, as most in Ukraine have lost their jobs due to the war. This is her right here. Ukrainians as a people aren't used to relying on others, she said. We want to work. We don't want welfare. For Teba, who is staying with relatives in Ohio, TPS would make it easier for him to open a bank account, get a driver's license, and seek better employment while he awaits a decision on his asylum case. We'll continue to beg, to plead, Tebe said. We are in danger. I want to emphasize it. And only TPS for Cameroon will help us be taken out of that danger. It's very necessary. All right, so I want to end on this note. First and foremost, we should be welcoming refugees and allowing them to assimilate in our country. The purpose of giving them opportunities to get permanent residency or seek asylum is so that they can better assimilate. People want to say these People will come and not try to integrate into our society, but how can you integrate if you don't have a driver's license or proper documentation to rent an apartment, get a job, that sort of thing? We are very fortunate that our culture has spread so far around the world. American culture is very big. Many people know English, and me as an ESL teacher, I know there's a high demand to want to know the English language. And because of that, it makes it much easier for many people to assimilate to us because they have been exposed to us in their countries way before they've come here. That's what I want to say about assimilation. Now, another point I want to make is that in the Black world, or in the Black discussion sphere, there has been some talk of saying, how are we welcoming these Ukrainian refugees and Black refugees? And these people are coming from a country that has neo-Nazis, and they might come here and be racist against Black Americans. And I understand that this fear is very real because in American history, we saw this happen time and time again. The Irish come, the Scottish come, the Germans come, the French come. They assimilate into whiteness, and then later their children and their children's children become the Ku Klux Klan members, the Republican politicians, the police officers that shoot us, the COs that brutalize us when we're in prison, the teachers that disrespect us in school, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. There is a real fear, an understandable fear, why Black Americans and other brown Americans would be scared that these refugees would come and assimilate to whiteness. It's understandable. I understand it. And I sympathize with that because it is a real danger, and I'm not discrediting that. We should not be arguing that these people should not come because they could assimilate into whiteness, because they've already assimilated to whiteness in their own country. Without there being any Black people in Ukraine, a sizable amount, they were already neo-Nazis there, right? So just because some of them might come here, that doesn't change the fact they would still be Nazis there or here, regardless, right? And somebody's going to say, well, why would you purposely let in Nazis? We don't know how people will react to a new environment, right? For example, I did not have the same beliefs that I have now until I started to travel. I had almost anti-immigration views when I was living in Miami, a very Spanish-speaking city, and insisting that people speak English, speak American English, until I lived for many years in countries where I did not know the local language, and I had to feel that shame and disgrace of not knowing a language, feeling stupid in public, that sort of thing. And I'm filming this video in Turkey, and I still feel like that now, sometimes in public. We should not be arguing that Ukrainians shouldn't come here because they might turn into Klan members on us. We should be arguing that everybody should get the same treatment as Ukrainians who are being welcomed in open arms in all of these countries. Let's not lose sight of the bigger picture of our common humanity that we have as people on this planet, and let us not lose sight of our biggest fight, which is against white supremacy ideology, not white people. I don't want anybody to be confused. Our fight is not against white people or a white person. It's against the ideology of whiteness that allows Ukrainians to get easier access into the US and allows them to do with impunity what they've done to Haitians, Cameroonians, Central Americans, and all other people who are trying to just seek asylum and a better life. I hope my message is clear, and I hope it comes across well. Thank you for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill. Hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, share. Peace.